uphill. And at the same time, Auckland Transport believes the top speed on downtown Auckland streets should be reduced to 30 k's an hour. So motorised scooters could be travelling on footpaths at doing almost 30, while cars could be travelling on the streets at doing 25. So one can assume it would be safer to walk on the road rather than on the footpath.
That's often the way in the city here, before the scooters. I mean, I agree 100%. And it seems extraordinary that we just dump thousands of these things in the city and then see what happens.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. People are having accidents, and ACC is going to be paying for it. If we're at 14 already, then I guarantee that number's going to get pretty high.
It's the modern way, though, isn't it? It's disruption, isn't it? See what happens.
Well, it certainly is disrupting, but normally you can see the technology and say, yeah, absolutely, I see the benefit of that, but basically at the moment all I've seen is, like I say, men in suits pretending they're children again. The
world's longest sea bridge open at last between Hong Kong and China. Would you drive on a 55-kilometre long bridge?
I don't see why not, but it looks like it's single lane, so I'd be worried about getting behind a slow driver, which would drive me nuts.
Or getting behind someone who is about to cause a big pile-up.
That also would be annoying.
There wouldn't be many places to go.
Yeah, well, it doesn't look like there's also any areas where you can pull over or anything. So it does look like once you're on it, you've got to keep going for your 55k. So, I mean, I'm sure they've thought of all of this, but I don't know.
Would I drive on it? Yes, of course.
Would you like to? Would it be fun?
Well, yeah. I mean, we don't have anything like it here. You get on the Auckland Harbour Bridge and you're off it before you know it. This would be quite an experience.
Okay. Hong Kong media are reporting that the physical condition of drivers on the bridge is monitored by cameras, and an alert is sent if a driver yawns more than 3 times in 20 seconds. Oh. You can't yawn 3 times in 20 seconds.
I was about to say, if you're doing that, aren't you asleep with your mouth open?
Well,
maybe that's why. Maybe.
That's extraordinary technology, and I'd be worried that it would mistake my singing for me yawning.
Oh,
and
true.
I'd be pulled over.
Yes,
there's a very enthusiastic singer in the car.
Good point. But if they're doing it on a bridge, why aren't they doing it everywhere else? Like, isn't that also a problem on the open road anyway?
But they might stop traffic on the bridge as per your previous concern, so I guess they really want to make sure the bridge keeps flowing.
They're doing other versions of it everywhere else. They're rolling out tech to make sure you don't jaywalk and various other things.
Crikey.
The project is not short of critics, especially those who see it as further encroachment on Hong Kong's semi-autonomy. So Hong Kong residents will only be granted a licence to cross to the mainland by car if they hold mainland government positions or if they make major contributions to charities in South China. It's an odd state of affairs, isn't it?
Is that to stop congestion or something? I mean, why else
No,
would you?
I don't think it's to stop congestion. I think it's a bridge of privilege to a certain extent.
Oh, I see. Right.
So you shoot across the bridge and make a big donation and then shoot back. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me.
In defence of riding e-scooters and costing ACC money, Texter says, I would far rather my ACC taxpayer dollars are used for people being active rather than those that drink and smoke and drive and watch TV on the couch.
And then get on an e-scooter.
Well, they will get their wish with e-scooters, I guarantee it.
There's not much harm that can come to you sitting on the couch, though. Martin Cocker, very nice to have your company today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Victoria Stewart, nice to see you in Auckland.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
And thanks for your company, everybody. We are, of course, back tomorrow at the same time, just after 4 o'clock with the panel. And Lisa Owen is coming up forthwith on Checkpoint.
Ki te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's programme, the Prime Minister puts the kibosh on a regional fuel tax for Wellington. A school rugby coach is convicted of 95 sexual abuse charges. Steel and Tube is fined a record $1.9 million for false claims over steel mesh. The Waitaki community is in shock after the death of a 14-year-old girl in a hit and run last night. We go to Turkey for the latest on the death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. And an anonymous letter forces an inquest to reopen into the death of a man who died from meningococcal disease 9 years ago.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The lawyer for the Auckland rugby coach today found guilty of almost 100 sex charges is not ruling out an appeal. Alosio Taimo was found guilty of 95 sexual abuse charges against 17 boys at the end of his trial at the High Court in Auckland. His lawyer, Panama Leao Anai, says Taimo is disappointed in the verdicts.
I think he's extremely upset by the verdicts, but I suppose given the nature of the charges and the number of complainants, it may not have been unexpected, although he probably is still very upset about it.
Panama Leao says Taimo will consider an appeal after the sentencing. Steel & Tube has apologised to its customers and shareholders after it was fined a record $1.9 million for making false and misleading representations about its steel mesh products. The company earlier pleaded guilty to 24 charges under the Fair Trading Act. Catherine Hutton reports.
The charges related to claims Steel & Tube made between 2012 and 2016 about the products being independently tested when they were not. The company also falsely said products met the Australian-New Zealand standard for reinforcing steel, but they had not been properly aged or tested. The judge said Steel & Tube had acted in a grossly negligent way, and senior management should have known about the large-scale non-compliance over the 4-year period. The fine is the highest ever under the Fair Trading Act. Steel & Tube's share price rose 0.74% following the news of the court's decision. The company says it won't affect its 2019 financial result. This is Catherine Hutton.
An anonymous letter that makes allegations about the death of an Auckland medical student has forced an inquest to reopen 9 years after the man died. 22-year-old Zachary Gravitt died from meningococcal disease after his illness went undiagnosed for 4 hours at Auckland Hospital in 2009. A 2011 inquest resulted in the DHB being ordered to pay the family compensation when the coroner found shortcomings in Mr Gravitt's treatment. In 2016, the family received a letter questioning elements of the board's original investigation. Zachary's father, Lance Gravitt, says the confidential letter was devastating and reopened old wounds. Mr Gravitt says the family's trust in the DHB has now been marred by lies, deceit and unprofessionalism. The police are to urgently review the investigation into the death of a Christchurch woman who died from head injuries after falling out of a moving ute in 2013. 27-year-old Libby Mackay was driving home from a party with her boyfriend, Mike Brown, in Christchurch in June 2013. The Nelson MP, Nick Smith, wrote to the Commissioner of Police on behalf of Ms Mackay's mother, Pauline Webby, raising concerns about the investigation. The Commissioner, Mike Bush, says the police have spoken to the Chief Coroner and have requested a copy of the accident analysis report commissioned by Ms Webby. He says the police will review the investigation to determine the next step. The Prime Minister has ruled out any new regional fuel taxes while she is still in office. Jacinda Ardern made the pledge during question time this afternoon during a fiery exchange with Nationals leader Simon Bridges. The debate was prompted by Mr Bridges' claim the government's been in secret talks with Wellington Council about a regional fuel tax, something the Transport Minister says is not going to happen. Mr Bridges was questioning why the government continues to impose more taxes when the price of fuel is already so high.
Why does the government's regional fuel tax legislation enable other councils to bid for a regional fuel tax from 2021 onwards?
Speaker, the regional fuel tax legislation puts in a date, but I can give this guarantee to this House and to consumers there will be no other regional fuel taxes while I am Prime Minister.
Jacinda Ardern in Parliament this afternoon. The Duchess of Sussex has been whisked through a market in the Fiji capital Suva due to a security risk that Kensington Palace has blamed on excessive crowds. Meghan Markle was supposed to spend 15 minutes speaking with vendors at the municipal market to learn about a UN Women's project that promotes female empowerment. But after about 6 minutes, she was quickly escorted through the market by security as throngs of people arrived to greet her. The Oamaru community is rallying behind a family whose daughter died in a hit and run. The 14-year-old was hit by a vehicle on State Highway 1 in the town last night. The police this afternoon charged a man with failing to stop. The Waitaki District Mayor, Gary Kircher, welcomed the arrest, but says the community will be focused on supporting the victim's family.
For the most part, it'll be a time for them to come to terms with it, and for that, really, I think a lot of people just leave them alone and let them get on with it. But it's really important they know that assistance is there if they need it, and people are wanting to help.
Gary Kircher says Oamaru is a resilient community whose people will do what they can to support those affected. It's 5:05. Sport. The Wallabies halfback Will Genia has laid bare the despair of a decade of Bledisloe Cup beatings as he eyes one last crack at the All Blacks before next year's World Cup in Japan this weekend. The 92 Test halfback and flanker David Pocock are Australia's only two survivors from the last time the two sides played one another in Japan 9 years ago, a match the All Blacks won 32-19. In the 24 Trans-Tasman encounters he's played, Genia has won only 3 of them, and he admits he's fed up. However, he says while the All Blacks already have the Bledisloe Cup locked away for another year, there's no way Saturday's clash in Yokohama is a dead rubber.
It's never a dead rubber, regardless of whether the trophy's on the line or not. Like it's an amazing experience to get to play them. You get sick and tired of losing it, but you also love playing them. Once you've lost, right? You park it. You're like, yeah, I get to play the All Blacks again. And for me, in a sense, that's a privilege because I love playing against the best. So you can't just get so hung up on, oh, I lost. This is disappointing, all that sort of stuff.
Meanwhile, Israel Folau is set to play for Australia to the end of 2022 after reportedly signing a 4-year contract extension with the Wallabies and the New South Wales Waratahs. The New Zealand shot put star Tom Walsh has been nominated for the 2018 IAAF World Male Athlete of the Year award after a stellar season of results. Walsh won the Diamond League title, Commonwealth Games gold and the World Indoor title. The governing body announced the shortlist this morning with Walsh in a group of 10 that's largely made up of runners, including Olympic marathon champion Kenya's Eliud Kipchoge. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Simon Morris is back at the movies. Now the school holidays are over. We have a window on the world of Venezuelan refugees singing for their supper, and my guest is the English physicist and former rock star Brian Cox, although some would say he's still a rock star, just of science, not music, although he is happy to take questions on both, with me, Brian Crump, from After the News at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Coromandel Peninsula, including Bay of Plenty, mainly fine with isolated showers. Waikato to Wellington, including the central high country. Mostly cloudy, a few showers from tomorrow morning, turning to rain south of Taumarunui in the evening. Gisborne to Wairarapa, mainly fine, cloud increasing tomorrow and rain developing in Wairarapa in the evening. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine today, rain spreading north tomorrow morning and afternoon, then clearing overnight. Babula, Westland and Fiordland, cloudy, rain and heavy falls in Fiordland, spreading to Westland today and to Bulla tomorrow morning, then clearing from the south. Otago and Southland, cloudy, rain about Stewart Island, spreading to mainland Southland this evening and Otago overnight. Snow possible to 800 metres in Otago tomorrow morning. Rain easing to showers around midday tomorrow, then clearing at night. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy with the odd shower tomorrow. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. Coming up on Checkpoint, the Prime Minister rules out a regional fuel tax in Wellington. And we go to Turkey for the latest on the death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. But we begin tonight with an Auckland school rugby coach who has been convicted of 95 sexual abuse charges following a 2.5-month-long trial. Oloseo Taimor has been on trial in the High Court at Auckland since August, defending more than 100 charges, detailing the historical abuse of 17 boys. This morning, after deliberating for 2 days, the jury returned with its verdicts. Our reporter Anika Smith was in court and filed this report.
Oloseo Taimor showed no emotion this morning as each of the 106 charges against him were read out. The jury found him guilty of 95 of the charges and delivered not guilty verdicts for the remaining 11, which included one charge relating to the 18th complainant. The verdicts brought to an end what was described by Justice Moore as a long and harrowing trial. Timor sexually abused 17 boys over nearly 3 decades, at his house, in his car and in school sports sheds. He also abused them at McDonald's, where he worked as a manager, and at some of the complainants' homes. His youngest victim was just 9 years old at the time. The Crown's case was that Timor was a trusted member of his community who abused that trust for his own pleasure. Speaking after the verdicts, Crown prosecutor Jasper Rhodes said it had been a complex case.
It was very, very complex. Lots of moving parts, lots of witnesses, lots of complainants, lots of people needing to be in the right place at the right time, and a lot of evidence. I think we were up to 2,500 pages of notes. So yeah, lots of complicating factors.
25 of the charges are sexual violation, a crime that carries a maximum penalty of 20 years in jail. That and the sheer volume of charges means a lengthy sentence is expected.
I requested reports to be done so that we could consider, or ask the court to consider, preventive detention. But whether that's the case depends on those reports. In terms of the actual sentence, it would be high, probably unprecedented.
Timor's defence lawyer, Panama Leawanai, said his client was disappointed with the verdicts.
I think he's extremely upset by the verdicts, but I suppose given the nature of the charges and the number of complainants, it may not have been unexpected, although he probably is still very upset about it.
The former rugby coach claimed the case against him was all lies and fabrication, but his lawyer is not sure whether Timor still claims he's innocent.
We've had to talk to him about that because he's going to be seen to by 2 psychiatrists and also by a probation officer. So on the way to recovery, we've indicated that, given him some advice, and so we'll see whether he takes it or not.
Mr. Leawanai said he was relieved the lengthy trial was now over and satisfied Timor wasn't found guilty on all of the 106 charges.
Having said that, you've got to balance it up. There are a large number of young men and they've come to court, and so their lives have also been greatly affected. Mr. Timor was highly respected amongst the community, but when you have these number of young men and relatives who've made their complaints, one's got to look at these sorts of things objectively as well.
Jasper Rhodes said he hoped the complainants, who had each gone through the difficult process of giving evidence, would find some peace in the trial's outcome.
I'm hopeful that for many of them it'll bring some form of closure, that they have been through a very long process. I don't think anyone can feel happy about this sort of thing. It's not a win or anything like that, but I hope they feel some form of ability to move forward from this, and that it does feel like a positive step in the road for them.
Timor has been remanded in custody for sentencing on the 14th of December. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Annika Smith aho.
Jacinda Ardern has ruled out any new regional fuel tax while she's Prime Minister in a spontaneous declaration to Parliament this afternoon. Ms Ardern and the National leader Simon Bridges were having a spirited exchange about the high cost of petrol when the Prime Minister rose to her feet to make the pledge. The government has faced ongoing criticism for piling on extra fuel taxes when the price at the pump is already sky high. And this morning, Mr Bridges was looking to increase that pressure with claims about secret talks with councils in Wellington. Emma Hatton reports.
Talk of a regional fuel tax for Wellington was stomped out as fast as it arose today. The National Party leader Simon Bridges says the City Council has been in secret talks with the government about imposing a fuel tax. But the Transport Minister Phil Twyford says that is categorically wrong.
Simon Bridges is flat wrong. The government has explicitly ruled out a regional fuel tax for Wellington.
Wellington's Mayor Justin Lester reiterated that message. This afternoon, Mr Bridges stood by his earlier claims, saying he was told the information by a well-placed source.
The source is clear that this has been happening until very recently. Actually, let's go back to what happened this morning. The spokesperson for the City Council made it clear I was right. Now, that person may have been heavied out of that position by Phil Twyford, who knows how embarrassing this is right now, by a mayor who also knows that's the position. But until very recently, they have been talking about a regional fuel tax in Wellington. No ifs, no buts.
But the council spokesperson mentioned, Richard McLean, says there was some confusion over the interpretation of his comments, and he didn't confirm that talks about a fuel tax were underway. A point Justin Lester backed up.
His comments that he said to me were along the lines of we're in discussions with the government around Let's Get Wellington Moving. We have been for some years. that they're not secret, and that nothing had been confirmed. So those were the context of his responses, and I've talked to him about that, and I'm confident that what he said was the right thing. It's perhaps been taken out of context.
However, Phil Twyford says Wellington councils did ask for a regional fuel tax a few weeks ago, but were turned down.
We're in discussions with Wellington councils and have been for most of this year about an ambitious transport investment plan for the region. I asked the officials to look at all the options for a fully funded and financed long-term transport plan for Wellington. And in that context, the Wellington councils asked for a regional fuel tax, but I've ruled it out.
During question time in Parliament this afternoon, Simon Bridges asked Jacinda Ardern about the government's intention for planned fuel tax hikes.
Why does the government's regional fuel tax legislation enable other councils to bid for a regional fuel tax from 2021 onwards?
Speaker, the regional fuel tax legislation puts in a date, but I can give this guarantee to this House and to consumers: there will be no other regional fuel taxes while I am Prime Minister, which at the moment feels like it might be for a while.
Under pressure.
That was news to other MPs, including Coalition colleague Shane Jones, speaking for the Transport Minister.
When did he, as Minister of Transport, know about this change of policy?
Mr. Speaker, speaking on behalf of the Minister of Transport, when the Prime Minister stood up.
The policy might have been news to Shane Jones, but it's no secret that Wellington is looking at how it will fund its massive infrastructure project, Let's Get Wellington Moving. Some of the ideas for the project include a secondary Mount Victoria tunnel, light rail and a new layout at the Basin Reserve. Phil Twyford says he can't talk publicly yet about how Wellington's infrastructure will be funded. He says a decision will likely be made public early next year. In Wellington for Checkpoint, Emma Hatton.
Meanwhile, it's going to be a case of make do and mend for Northland's deadliest road. The Transport Agency has confirmed today that it won't be building a 4-lane highway from Whangarei to Te Hana. Instead, it's promising to fix up the worst bit, the notorious stretch of road that is between the city and the Marsden Point roundabout. Here's Lois Williams.
It is the nastiest bit of road in the north, and in a region of challenging roads, that's saying something. State Highway 1, heading south, is a white-knuckle drive. It's too narrow, it's too busy, the intersections are dodgy, and every second vehicle's a truck, or in summer, a camper van. The latest head-on crash killed 2 people at Labour weekend, and Northland's traffic chief, Wayne Avis, has had about enough of dealing with the carnage.
The police have got to go and notify the next of kin, which is never a pleasant job, but we've got to do something. It was recently published as one of the most dangerous pieces of road in New Zealand, and in the last 12 months, 7 fatalities on that piece of road, and that's 7 too many.
Before the last election, there was hope that the 22-kilometre killer road would be rebuilt into a real highway, with 4 lanes and a median barrier, like the Waikato Expressway, all the way to Te Hana. And eventually, the Holy Grail, 4 lanes all the way to the Auckland motorway. The region's 4 councils and roading authorities all backed the proposal, and the government was encouraging. But the transport agencies had to re-evaluate that plan to align with the Labour-led government's priorities: less money for highways, more for regional roads. And Systems Manager Brett Glidden says the new plan is to make the existing road safer.
We're talking about widening the road, talking about putting barriers on the sides of the road, putting barriers down the middle where we can fit them, and when we get to intersections, looking at ways of making those safer, whether that be roundabouts like we're going to do at Loop Road, or putting in right turn bays and left turn bays and providing extra width, so they're much safer roads.
Brett Glidden says the reduced highways budget is not the reason for the change of plan. He says the traffic movements on the road from Whangarei to Te Hana, 90,000 a day, simply don't justify a 4-lane highway. And in any case, he says you don't need 4 lanes to have a safe road. The agency's now working on long-term plans for a second road from Whangarei to the Marsden roundabout, to the east of the present route.
So the old one would be the old road as it currently exists, but with safety improvements, so it's a much safer road to drive, and the new road would be built to the latest design standards, but most likely would be 2 lanes with passing lanes.
The chair of Northland's Regional Transport Committee, John Bain, says any safety improvements are better than none, but he's disappointed. He says the North, with just 3% of New Zealand's population, has 12% of the crashes and deserves better. And he's adamant the 4-lane plan was the better and safer option.
It comes down to funding, doesn't it? Once we get money withdrawn from the roading systems of Northland, then we've got to take what we get.
Brett Glidden says the Transport Agency will also design a new road to connect State Highway 1 with State Highway 15. That's the old Mangakahia Road. And that'll put an end to the parade of logging trucks that rumble through Winding Loop Road, rolling over at infrequent intervals and terrifying the locals. And the agency will also start planning for a bypass around the Brynderwen Hill. Traffic Chief Wayne Avis says he'd be grateful for anything that would reduce police call-outs to fatal crashes on the road to Whangarei, especially median barriers.
We know that the barriers, especially the wire rope one, if you look at the Brynderwen, since they've been installed, there's been no fatalities or serious injuries, although we know they've been hit a large number of times. If it saves one life, it's got to be good.
In Whangarei for Checkpoint, Lois Williams.
A Waitaki community is in shock after the death of a 14-year-old girl last night. She died when she was hit by a vehicle on State Highway 1 in Oamaru at about 10:40. Now, support for the family has been flooding in from a community that is reeling from the tragic event. This afternoon, police have charged a man believed to be the driver. Our Otago Southland reporter Tess Brunton filed this report.
It's been described as a parent's worst nightmare. A 14-year-old girl dead from a hit and run in the seaside town of Oamaru. St Kevin's College confirmed the girl was a Year 10 student at the school. It released a statement online saying the school's chapel has been opened as a safe place for students to meet and grieve. The college says it's been a traumatic day for the school, particularly for students who knew and loved her. Waitaki District Mayor Gary Kircher says many residents would have woken up to the shocking news.
It's not really the sort of thing you expect to hear. So I think, from what I've seen and heard so far, obviously there's been an outpouring of sympathy and sadness for the family and for the victim, and people have certainly been rallying around and looking to support each other.
Online, there are messages and tributes mourning the teenager's death. In a tribute on social media, a friend said, "Rest easy, my girl. Gone way too soon. Sending all of my love to her family and other close friends." Another commenter says it's a parent's worst nightmare and so sad her life was cut so short. Detective Senior Sergeant Rob Hanna says a 30-year-old man has been charged with failing to stop to a certain injury in relation to the crash. He will appear in Oamaru District Court at the next available hearing date. The police haven't ruled out further charges being laid. But what happened and what caused the crash? Mr Kircher hopes the man in custody may be able to help answer these questions. But until the police investigation reaches its conclusion, he says the community will be focused on supporting the victim's family.
For the most part, it'll be a time for them to come to terms with it, and for that, really, I think a lot of people just leave them alone and let them get on with it. But it's really important they know that assistance is there if they need it, and people are wanting to help.
Waitaki Mental Health Unit Manager Paul Cullen says schools have processes in place to support students in tragic times. But Mr Cullen says the unit will provide additional support for those who need it. Police are appealing for any witnesses in the area to come forward with any helpful information. For Checkpoint, Cortez Brunton, Tane.
US President Donald Trump has accused Saudi authorities of the worst cover-up ever in the killing of prominent journalist Jamal Khashoggi, and is vowing to revoke the visas of some of those believed to be responsible. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has revealed more details of the alleged assassination squad and what he describes as a savage, pre-planned murder. Earlier today, a news agency reported that parts of the journalist's dismembered body had been unearthed in the backyard of the Saudi Consulate General's home in Istanbul. CNN correspondent Ben Wederman is in Ankara, and I asked him what he knew about the gruesome discovery being reported.
As far as our sources go, police sources in Istanbul, that is not the case. And there's been a lot of confusion today about that, with various organizations reporting that the body's been found, but it has not. And certainly the Turkish news organizations, which are quite hyperactive, if there was a scent of a body, they would be on it. So no body to date has been found, and we did hear Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan today, saying in his very pointed questions directed at the Saudis in his speech today that he wants to know where the body is, but no, the body has not been found.
Because obviously this is a crucial element of this case. The body's still missing, if indeed these reports are incorrect. What new information did President Erdogan reveal in his speech?
To tell you the truth, not as much as anybody expected. He had said on Sunday that he would reveal the naked truth about the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, and what we saw was a truth still with some clothing on. He did provide a fairly detailed timeline in which he explained that on the 28th of September, Jamal Khashoggi went to the Saudi embassy and was told to come back on the 2nd of October. That, according to the Turkish president, set in motion the formation of this hit team that came and that the Saudis themselves acknowledged killed the Washington Post columnist. But beyond some small details, for instance, he did say that the hard drive for the closed-circuit television system within the consulate has been removed mysteriously. And in addition to that, he did say that the local Turkish employees at the consulate and the consular residents were gathered in a room and told there was going to be an audit today, and on that day, the 2nd of October, and to go home. But beyond that, he really just confirmed a lot of the leaks that we have been hearing from Turkish officials who request anonymity. So we have really just the presidential stamp on a lake of leaks that's been coming out of Turkish officials since almost the first days of this drama.
Did he not suggest that some of the Saudi team had in fact done a recce, if you like, in a forest area outside of Istanbul? Is there some suggestion that that is where his body may be?
Yes, he did say there's two areas. There's what's known as the Belgrade Forest and the Yalovvar area outside of Istanbul. That they did do a recce there, but I can tell you, CNN and many other news organizations have sent crews to both those areas day after day, and they have not only found nothing, they haven't even seen the police doing anything out there. So that remains something of a mystery. There were leaks to the effect that some of the cars from the Saudi embassy, one or two perhaps, went to those areas the day of the murder. But that remains the most mysterious sort of corner of this labyrinth of a story.
What about the personal belongings of Jamal Khashoggi that have turned up in this consulate car? Can you tell us about that?
Yes, that's in what's known as the Sultan Ghazi car park in Istanbul, in sort of an ordinary business residential neighborhood. It's a blue car with green diplomatic plates belonging to the Saudi Arabian embassy. We understand that it was parked there several days after the murder, and it was discovered yesterday Istanbul time. And forensic detectives were brought in. They looked around the outside of the vehicle because it's diplomatic property. They had to get a Saudi diplomat to accompany them when they went to look at the interior today. And we are told they came away with 2 suitcases. We don't know the contents of it, and some other stuff. But excuse me. Police say that vehicle was parked in front of the consulate on the 2nd of October, the day when Jamal Khashoggi was murdered.
What about the politics of all of this? Because you've got President Erdogan there saying that he wants these people held accountable. He would like some of them to be extradited to Turkey, that the crime has happened there, so any kind of justice needs to be delivered in Turkey, and asking the Crown Prince for some answers. But here's the thing, President Erdogan does not have the best track record in his treating of journalists either, does he?
No, in fact, according to press freedom organizations, there are 70 Turkish journalists currently behind bars. But this has given the Turkish president an opportunity to present himself as a champion of freedom of the press, somewhat ironically, and the irony isn't lost on a lot of people, including many Turks.
Ben, just briefly before we go, this has taken so many twists and turns. Where are you expecting it to go next?
Well, that's going to be interesting, because if, despite the much anticipated speech by the Turkish president on Tuesday, Turkish officials continue to leak drip by drip these very interesting details about this case, this drama could go on for quite some time. And I think, there's always hanging over the story the audio recording of Jamal Khashoggi's torture, murder, and dismemberment that I think the Turkish president is hanging out there until he gets maximum advantage from this story. So I think we can expect more of these day-by-day little bits of information coming out that keep this story on the front page.
And that is CNN correspondent Ben Wedeman reporting there from Ankara, Turkey. Now, in breaking news, we can confirm that the Electoral Commission has been approached by the New Zealand Police regarding claims of corruption made by former National MP Jamie-Lee Ross. The Electoral Commission says it is providing advice as required to the police with regard to the claim by Mr Ross that National Party leader Simon Bridges received a $100,000 political donation and did not disclose it according to electoral laws. Now, Checkpoint has also contacted the police this evening, but they have declined to make any further comment. The explosive claims of corruption made by Jamie-Lee Ross last week prompted the National Party to expel him. Simon Bridges has denied the claims and he says Mr Ross is lying. And coming up, an anonymous letter forces an inquest to reopen into the death of a man who died from meningitis 9 years ago. We meet the entrepreneurs making uninsurable quake-damaged homes insurable again, and royalty eyes up in North Otago spud farmers' Jersey bennies. We'd love your feedback. Don't forget you can text us on 2101 and you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us Checkpoint, or email us at checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
Nelson MP Nick Smith says there are too many inconsistencies in the 2013 death of a Christchurch woman, Libby Mackay, and he's welcoming the police review of their investigation. 27-year-old Libby Mackay died after falling out of a ute driven by her boyfriend, Mike Brown, in June 2013. Nick Smith approached the police commissioner on behalf of Libby Mackay's family, and the police say they're now urgently studying the entire investigation. Mr Smith says expert analysis has challenged the explanation from Libby's partner about her death. The Prime Minister has ruled out any new regional fuel taxes while she's in office. Jacinda Ardern made the pledge during question time this afternoon during a fiery exchange with Nationals leader Simon Bridges. The debate was prompted by Mr Bridges' claim the government's been in secret talks with Wellington Council about a regional fuel tax, something the Transport Minister says is not going to happen. The lawyer for the Auckland rugby coach today found guilty of almost 100 sex charges is not ruling out an appeal. Alosio Taimol was found guilty of 95 sexual abuse charges against 17 boys at the end of his trial in the High Court at Auckland. His lawyer, Panama Lea'au Anai, says Taimol is disappointed in the verdicts. Steel and Tube has apologised after it was fined almost $2 million for making false and misleading claims about its steel mesh products. The fine follows a guilty plea by the company to 24 charges under the Fair Trading Act. Steel and Tube says the breaches were unintentional. The charges relate to claims made about the testing regime for the steel products. The police have charged 2 further men with the murder of Whanganui Mangal Mob member Kevin Ratana in August. The 27-year-old was shot outside his Gonville home. Detectives in Whanganui say the arrested men are patched members of the Black Power and they'll appear in court next month on the same day as 3 other men already charged. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
Thanks, Katrina. Let's turn now to business news with Nona Peltier. Nona, the media company NZME has called it quits on its attempts to merge with its rival Stuff. So where does this leave both companies?
Well, I think it's going to leave some people very disappointed and others pretty happy, because this has been a really difficult attempted merger. The Commerce Commission knocked them back. It's been going back and forth for 2 years. And it's been unsettling for both companies and for the people who work there and for all the publications that are involved in all of this, because it's been unsettling. It would have involved some closures and some community newspapers and that sort of thing. And that was the concern that the Commerce Commission had all along. And the parties took their case as far, I guess, as they could. And now they've decided to give it a rest and go their separate ways, and that's how it's going to be. What happens next? I suppose we're going to see a lot of changes. Certainly Sky Television is in that mix too. It's not just Sky Television, it's, you know, all the media companies are faced with a lot of difficult choices as advertising revenues fall.
Yeah, no merger doesn't necessarily mean all the jobs are safe, does it?
No, it doesn't. It certainly doesn't. It's just a different time now. And what happens next, I guess we'll wait and see. NZME's share price was steady today following this announcement. So what were they at? Yeah, they finished up at 63 cents. And so that was basically where they ended off yesterday.
Hey, this story has caught my eye. New Zealand moved up in the ranks as the second riskiest country in the world in a global insurance study, behind Bangladesh.
Yes, Bangladesh is in a different category altogether, because while we are second, we swapped spots with Chile, which was third this time around. Last time it was second. And that's following, the last time they did a report was 2012. And so there's additional costs with the Canterbury earthquake. We've had additional earthquakes, big ones. We've had floods. And, you know, there's a lot of risk here in New Zealand. I mean, there's things that haven't happened, like volcanic eruptions, for example. So when Lloyd looks around the world and says, oh, where's the biggest risk? They see New Zealand. And one of the reasons why we feature so high is because our economy is so small relative to, say, the United States, which also has its share of natural disasters, but a much larger economy to absorb that. So risk being against a backdrop of economic size too. So that's why we're number 2. Bangladesh, though, is in a worse position, because while we are one of the riskiest, we're also one of the most insured. And we have some, we spoke earlier with the head of the Insurance Council, Tim Grafton. This is what he had to say.
It's just a clear reminder to us that we in New Zealand can never be complacent because we have a very high level of risk compared to other countries. This generation has experienced Canterbury and Kaikoura, extreme weather events and floods. So we need to focus on being a resilient country and ensuring our building codes are high to make ourselves more resilient to earthquakes. We need to be looking to the future, the long view around climate change risks, and avoid putting property and lives in areas that will be at significant risk in future. So I think it's just a very timely reminder.
That's the Insurance Council's Chief Executive, Tim Grafton.
So what about the markets today, Nona? Any excitement?
Well, a little bit. There's always some. So our index fell more than 1/3%. That was down 31 points to 8,642. And that was very much in line with Asia. That's worried about other things now, including Saudi Arabia, perhaps ramping up oil production, which saw some volatility in oil prices too. But our dollar was steady at 65.6 US cents, 92.4 Australian, and 50.5 pence.
Thank you so much. That's Nona Peltier with our business news there. The royal visit to Fiji was marked by a bit of drama today when the Duchess of Sussex was suddenly whisked through a local market due to security concerns. Earlier, she gave her first speech of her and Prince Harry's tour down under. Elizabeth Brown has this report.
The royal couple stepped out in the capital, Suva, today to attend a number of engagements as thousands of Fijians lined the streets to meet and greet them. And it seems in Fiji there's no shortage of royal fans.
Very excited to see them. Yeah. Feel good, feel proud. Very much looking forward and very excited. The whole family is excited to see them.
I feel good. She coming in Fiji, Lucas.
We happy.
Excited, I'm really excited.
Oh, it's very exciting to see the Queen to our country, to visit all families and the friends here.
It was an early start for Prince Harry, who flew solo for his first engagement of the day. Wearing the tropical dress of his Blues and Royals regiment and his medals, he attended a solemn wreath-laying ceremony at the National War Memorial grounds. He stopped and spoke to Fijian war veterans, including a number who'd served with the British Armed Forces. But the spotlight was soon turned on his wife as they went together to the University of the South Pacific for her first official address of the tour. Her focus was the importance of education for women and girls. She said everyone should be afforded the opportunity to receive the education they want.
For women and girls in developing countries, this is vital. Providing them with access to education is the key to economic and social development. Because when girls are given the right tools to succeed, they can create incredible futures, not only for themselves, but for all of those around them.
She also announced 2 grants which will allow the university and the Fiji National University to run workshops to empower their female staff.
Grants like this ensure that women are provided with the training and skills to operate effectively in their roles, and that those with leadership potential are given the opportunity to be heard and recognized at the most senior level. My husband Harry and I wish you all the very best of luck as you continue your studies and your work. Congratulations to all of you. Vinaka Makalulu.
Meghan then headed to the Suva markets without Harry, where big crowds were waiting to welcome her. But it was the crowds inside the market which led to the security alert, and she was quickly whisked through due to concerns about the packed indoor venue. The couple's next and final public engagement in Fiji will be at Nandi International Airport tomorrow, where the Duke will unveil a statue before they fly out to Tonga. For Checkpoint, Ko Elizabeth Brown, aho.
News Corp Australia's Andrew Huff was at the market during the Duchess's visit and says things were calm until about halfway through her 15-minute visit.
It was hot in there, it was very loud, and I think the decision was taken to accelerate the program and effectively cut the visit short by about half. She was due in there about 15 minutes. She ended up being in there about 7 or 8 minutes. Then when she came out of the market, there were a phenomenal amount of people there. The crowds were intense, and they were starting to jostle and starting to surge on the Duchess's car when she was leaving. And so the decision was made by Kensington Palace Security, Scotland Yard, Royal Protection Detail detectives to cut the visit short over the security concerns. Now, regardless of the rights or wrongs of that, the Duchess's safety is paramount, as is her unborn child. But regardless, the way that it was left and accelerated, and the tight security has left many locals disappointed, particularly some of the women who were due to speak to the Duchess, but it was literally a hi, how are you, what do you do, and then moved on. So it has triggered a row here, and the palace is very keen to point out that it was already a short visit. We were already on the way out. She spoke to everyone that she needed to speak to, but it has somewhat overshadowed what has been a terrific day otherwise, particularly with a landmark speech that the Duchess made about education.
In the pictures, because I've had a look at some of the pictures, and the crowd is there, they all seem to have their phones raised. They're keen to get a photo of her, and as you say, they kind of look, calm and friendly. Did she appear distressed at any point in all of this?
No, she didn't. Not at all. There was a moment in which there is video footage that was taken in which she has a terse conversation with one of her aides. The contents of that conversation is unknown, but no, she didn't appear distressed at all. She wasn't under any security threat. There wasn't a particular incident that had been prevented or anything like that. But it is a public place. It is a public market. Locals have described to us that there is some crime concerns around the area. I know that the government and the local officials are keen to put forward the best possible picture of Fiji, and it is a beautiful place, and it is a magnificent population with beautiful people and really kind people. But there is a crime underbelly here, particularly in downtown Suva. So I don't know. I'm not a Royal Protection Officer. My job is not to guard members of the royal family. Scotland Yard take it incredibly seriously, and they don't take any risks whatsoever.
And that is News Corp Australia's Andrew Huff. Well, Steel and Tube has been fined a record $1.9 million for making false and misleading representations about its steel mesh products. The fine is the highest ever under the Fair Trading Act and follows a guilty plea by the company to 24 charges under the Fair Trading Act. The charges relate to claims that Steel and Tube made between 2012 and 2016 about the products being independently tested when they were not. The company also falsely said its products met the Australia-New Zealand standard for reinforcing steel, but they hadn't been properly aged or tested. Now, steel mesh provides strength and stability in the event of an earthquake. The Commerce Commission's chairman, Mark Berry, told our reporter Kate Gudsall the fact that the company received the maximum fine indicates the seriousness of the offending.
The judge, to use his words, has found Steel and Tube to be grossly negligent in the way that they went about doing their testing for compliance with building standards for steel mesh. That's a serious matter. Consumers do need to be able to rely and have confidence on building standards and compliance with codes, and there have been failures over a 4-year period in the case of Steel and Tube.
In terms of your investigation, what did you learn about Steel and Tube?
When we became aware of potential non-compliance with the building code, on 2 separate occasions we made purchases of batches of steel mesh from them and had them independently tested. And that testing resulted in findings that these particular batches that we had acquired were not compliant with the building code. So that's what caused us to have these concerns about non-compliance with building code standards. You'll see from the court's judgment there that they have recorded a material range of failings by Steel and Tube in the way that they've gone about doing the testing processes. The court has been highly critical of the non-compliance with the building code and, as I've already mentioned, has described Steel and Tube's conduct as grossly negligent.
They also said that the company couldn't be permitted to just simply wash their hands of this. Do you think that fine goes far enough?
It is a significant amount. $1.88 million is a major penalty. There's always debates over appropriate levels of penalties that do act as proper deterrents, but as I mentioned before, this is the maximum penalty that has been imposed under the Fair Trading Act.
Steel and Tube is refusing to talk to RNZ News, but in a statement to the Stock Exchange said the breaches of the law were unintentional. It's apologised to its customers and shareholders and says it stands by the integrity of its products. A Christchurch cottage industry has sprung up in the city. Entrepreneurs have been buying up uninsurable quake-damaged homes, fixing them up so they can be insured again, and selling them on, often for a tidy profit. Some repairs don't even require a building consent, with the council able to provide an exemption for as little as $500, as long as an engineer is happy to sign off on the work. Conan Young says if insurers, he's asking if insurers who originally said these homes were uneconomic to repair and paid out 6-figure sums to claimants have dropped the ball.
Colin Ashby pioneered the buying and fixing of written-off homes when he moved his structural engineering practice to the city from Warkworth soon after the February 2011 earthquake and was looking for somewhere to live.
We bought it for $236,000 and it's now valued at over $650,000.
And how much did you end up spending to fix it up?
Well, I had a mate of mine who was a builder up in Warkworth, and I paid for him to come down for a month and give me a hand, and we rolled the carpet up and found a magic glue to glue the cracks up. It's modified urethane, and it cost me 10 grand to fix up this written-off house.
The woman he bought the home off, who had already been paid out by her insurer for its full replacement value, told her neighbours there was a man from the North Island happy to take their quake-damaged homes off their hands.
We now own 4 houses in that street.
4 houses that were written off?
Yeah, that's 4 houses that were written off or deemed to be uneconomic to repair. But, you know, they were repairable.
So how was an engineer able to carry out often relatively simple repairs and get 5 homes reinsured when the insurance companies said they were uneconomic to repair?
My understanding was at the time engineers were a bit expensive, so they went and employed people off the street as assessors. And a lot of the insurance policies were, we will replace as new. And then the question came, how do you replace a cracked concrete unreinforced slab? And the logic was you pulled the roof off, the walls off, the slab up, and hello, you've demolished the house, therefore the house is a write-off. But you could actually repair it.
One of the repairs not on the radar of the insurance companies initially was injecting expanding foam into the ground and slowly lifting the foundations up until they were level again. Colin Ashby was the first engineer to sign off on the technique, despite early opposition from some of his engineering colleagues, something he says changed after he presented a paper at an engineering conference.
A little while after that, I ran across a land agent that I knew, and I said, by then, you know, as is, whereas was starting to happen, and I said, you know, how's it going? He says, it's going really, really well. He says, it's surprising the number of engineers that are buying these places.
A quick Google search reveals there are currently 6 companies in Christchurch buying, repairing and then on-selling quake-damaged homes. I'm here at this cafe to meet James Wallace. He's a spokesperson for one of these businesses, Your Property Solutions.
It's all about making it, like repairing the foundations is a huge one for a lot of them. So once the foundations were damaged, a lot of the houses were written off. One thing that isn't talked about a lot is how unqualified a lot of the people who made the assessments were as well. So you had, teachers and policemen and people like that who were deciding that houses were written off that weren't.
James Wallace says buying written-off properties in the hope they can be repaired, reinsured and on-sold for a profit is not without risk.
Sometimes they might look fine and be a lot more of a nightmare than they actually are to get repaired.
And so how's business?
It's good, yeah. It's been awesome to be able to be involved in, bringing the city back and a lot of these houses as well that, may have just been bowled or the ground may never have been used again. Being, able to play our part and fixing that is fantastic.
Depending on how extensive a repair is and as long as an engineer is willing to sign it off, it can be approved by the Christchurch City Council for as little as $500 as an exemption, meaning there's no need for a building consent. The council doesn't keep figures on how many foundation repairs have been signed off in this way, but since February 2011 it's approved close to 1,900 exemptions for a range of repairs and alterations. So did insurers fail to properly assess homes in Christchurch, creating an opportunity for some to make some easy money? Tim Grafton from the Insurance Council rejects this. He says only a small number of the nearly 10,000 cash payouts made for the full replacement of homes are likely to have involved insurers writing off homes that could have easily been repaired. Mr Grafton says experienced loss adjusters, engineers and other experts are employed by insurers to help them determine the loss a policyholder has actually incurred.
They would then make a determination around the offer to the customer. That is the standard process.
Yeah, but that is the standard process, but as you said, these were extraordinary times, and especially in the early phases after the quake. Was there a shortage of those experienced loss adjusters doing these assessments early on?
Oh, look, there was a huge demand on loss adjusting expertise. So, yeah, the system was under pressure throughout that time.
And could that explain how some of these places were maybe incorrectly assessed initially?
That would be pure speculation on your behalf.
There's no record of how many as-is, where-is homes could have been sold since the quakes, But a well-placed source told RNZ it could be anywhere between 1,500 and 2,500. And with roughly 3,000 yet to settle their claims and an unknown number of botched EQC repairs still to come, there's likely to be no shortage of properties ready to be snapped up by those wanting to make a quick buck. Kei oto tahi aho, mō te hotaka o te ahi nei, ko Konanyang tēnei.
And don't forget, we're keen to hear some of your feedback. You can text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. You can reach us on Facebook as well and also email the old-fashioned way, checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Time now, though, for an utterly delightful story. At a time when some people have declared carbs the enemy of the waistline, North Otago spud grower Jim O'Gorman is quietly chuffed that his tasty homegrown morsels are destined for royal tummies. Jim reckons the Kakanui soil is the secret to his juicy bennies, and word of his humble spuds has reached such high places that Government House has ordered them up, especially for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex royal visit. The Princes Charles and William and their wives have previously sampled the goods, so I asked Jim O'Gorman how royalty found out about his spuds.
It's not so much the royals, it's the chef who serves the royals. It's great that they have a circle all of their own of who gets what and who's interested in whose food. There's always a change in fads as far as fads in fashion, goodness me. And chefs talk amongst each other about what is and isn't good food and where the quality comes from, and so they go from there. Simon was at Fleurs, the executive chef at Government House was at Fleurs, and he asked me if I would continue to help serving him for other occasions when he moved on.
So you are a hot ticket item, or at least your spuds are.
It was a typical New Zealand 20 years to become an overnight success.
So some of them are winging their way to Wellington now, are they?
I'm hoping so, yeah.
Well, tell us about that. How many have you dug out of the ground, and when did they head off?
Just a small portion. I sent them away today in the courier. It's not feeding great banquet or anything like that. It's just for a quiet meal. It's for me. It's not so much the fact that we're feeding the royals, is that the quality that we're getting out of this soil here is quite fantastic. That people want it.
Come on, Jim. Isn't it just a little bit exciting that one of your special delicious spuds may pass the lips of the Duchess of Sussex? Just a little bit exciting?
Oh, no, not really. I'm sort of past that. For some people it is, and in the end it's just another invoice, really.
So tell me, how did you package them up? Is there any special trick to them? Do they still have dirt around them, or what's the deal?
Yeah, just as they come. Just as they come, that's how they go. They don't get charged any more or any less than anybody else. It's just another order.
What would your advice be about preparing them? Because, a lot of people that have juicy bennies once a year, Christmas time. So what is the key to getting it right?
Well, the biggest key is getting them fresh. And the sooner you eat them out of the garden, it's a bit like sweet corn. The sooner you eat it out of the garden, the nicer it will taste. And a test on new potatoes, I'm sorry for those in the supermarket, test on new potatoes is to rub your thumbnail across the skin, and if it peels off, just peels off and is moist underneath, then it's a fresh potato.
So you reckon, get your nail out, Jim, in the supermarket, run it over the spud that you are yet to purchase, and if it peels off a little bit, she's good to go?
Yep. If it doesn't, if you find you're going to have to scrape that, then it's a bit too old to eat the new spud. But,
all right.
Some people prefer them that way, but I find that the fresher they are, the less they'll have any bitter taste to them.
So let's assume we've done the supermarket test, or we've got our juicy bennies from you because we're incredibly special. Then what? How do we cook them?
Well, I always recommend you just steam or very quickly boil them in a little bit of water, but don't get crazy with them. And be prepared to check them often, because they'll go very quickly. Because being so fresh and young and small, they won't be sort of won't look good after 20 minutes of boiling in a pot, that's for sure.
All right, so we just
do
we stick a little knife in them, Jim, to make sure they're good to go?
Just a wee blade, and these can be eaten al dente, like spaghetti. Just have them not quite all the way through, just nice and firm. And I recommend the old traditional way is lots and lots of lashings of parsley butter and salt and pepper to taste.
There you have it, the word straight from Jim O'Gorman, extraordinaire spud grower there from North Otago, supplying the Duke and Duchess of Sussex with some spuds. Well, coming up after 6 tonight, an anonymous letter forces an inquest to reopen into the death of Zachary Gravitt, who died from meningitis 9 years ago. The Christchurch City Council says it's up to residents to help them get chlorine out of the city's water supply. And a drier than usual spring prompts warnings to conserve water in some parts of the country. And a year on, we look at what the coalition government has done for the regions. Get in touch. You can tweet us on 2101 on the text, that's text us rather, and at Checkpoint RNZ on Twitter. Facebook us, or you can email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. But first, here is Katrina with the news.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening, ko Katrina Batten aho. The police have been in touch with the Electoral Commission following a complaint about the National Party's handling of donations. The newly independent MP, Jamie Lee Ross, lodged a complaint with the police last week, accusing his former leader, Simon Bridges, of breaching electoral law. Both the National Party and Mr Bridges deny any wrongdoing. A spokesperson for the Electoral Commission says it's providing advice to the police as required. The lawyer for the Auckland rugby coach today found guilty of almost 100 sex charges is not ruling out an appeal. Alosio Taimo has been found guilty in the High Court at Auckland of 95 sexual abuse charges against 17 boys. Matthew Tunison reports.
The jury found Taimo not guilty of 11 other charges, including one relating to an 18th complainant. Speaking after the verdicts, his lawyer Panama Liawanai said the verdicts were not unexpected, given the number of charges and complainants. He said Taimo was extremely upset about the verdicts and would wait until sentencing to consider an appeal. This is Matthew Tunison.
The parents of an Auckland medical student have told an inquest about their son's last moments alive. 22-year-old Zachary Gravitt died from meningococcal disease after it went undiagnosed for 4 hours at Auckland Hospital in 2009. At the time, the DHB was ordered to pay the family compensation when the coroner found shortcomings in the treatment Mr Gravitt received. But in 2016, the parents received a letter that called into question elements of the DHB's original investigation. The content of the letter is suppressed. Jennifer Gravitt says she was struck by something odd when helping the nurse take a print of Zachary's hand moments after he had supposedly died.
I was shocked to see that the rigor mortis was already set in and it was hard to move his fingers to get a print, but we managed it. I remember thinking that Zachary must have died some time ago for this to be the case.
Jennifer Gravitt. The Commerce Commission says the record $1.9 million fine imposed on Steel and Tube reflects the seriousness of the offending. The company was fined for making false claims about its steel mesh products, which are used for earthquake strengthening. Steel and Tube is refusing to talk to RNZ News, but in a statement says the breaches of the law were unintentional. It says it stands by the integrity of its products. The Commission's chairman, Mark Berry, says the company's products failed to meet the building code over a 4-year period.
The judge, to use his words, has found Steel and Tube to be grossly negligent in the way that they went about doing their testing for compliance with building standards for steel mesh. That's a serious matter. Consumers do need to be able to rely and have confidence on building standards and compliance with codes.
The Commerce Commission's Mark Berry. Auckland MP Nikki Kaye is seeking assurances from officials about the quality of brake testing on Waiheke Island, saying public safety is paramount. RNZ today revealed the vehicle inspection company VTNZ has broken road safety rules by using an inferior brake test on the island for months with the knowledge of the Transport Agency. The brake tests apply to heavy vehicle certificates of fitness used on school and tour buses and trucks. The agency says there's been no immediate safety risk. Ms. Kay says she has requested an urgent briefing with the agency on the issues raised by RNZ.
It's very clear to me there are multiple issues here and that we need clarity urgently for people who may have had testing that firstly their vehicles are safe, secondly that they don't need to go back in for any form of retesting.
Auckland Central MP Nikki Kay. Electronic scooter riders have lodged 2 injury-related claims a day since the sharing service Lime put hundreds of e-scooters on Auckland and Christchurch streets last week. In the 7 days since the e-scooters were first made available in the 2 cities, ACC received 14 injury claims from e-scooter riders. An ACC spokesperson, Lisa Rautenbach, says there have been 9 e-scooter-related injury claims in Auckland and 5 in Christchurch. The e-scooters can travel up to 27 kilometres an hour and riders do not have to wear helmets. Lime is operating the e-scooter sharing service for a 3-month trial, after which time Auckland Council will decide whether to extend its licence. The royal visit to Fiji took an unexpected turn today when the Duchess of Sussex had to be whisked through the Suva market because of security concerns. Kensington Palace blamed the incident on excessive crowds. Elizabeth Brown reports.
Meghan Markle was supposed to spend 15 minutes at the Suva Municipal Market to speak to vendors about a UN Women's project, but after about 6 minutes she was quickly escorted out due to concerns about the security of the packed indoor venue. Earlier in the day she'd given her first speech of the royal tour. She addressed students and staff at the University of the South Pacific, focusing on the importance of education for women and girls, particularly in developing countries. Ko Elizabeth Brown, aho.
It's 6:05. Sport. The New Zealand cricketers fly out for Dubai tonight to play their first game in 7 months. The tour is also the first assignment for new coach Gary Stead, who replaced Mike Hesson, who stepped down in June after 6 years in the role. The Black Caps will play 3 2020 games against Pakistan, along with 3 one-day internationals and 3 tests. Their first game is tomorrow week. The All Blacks' first 5, Beauden Barrett, says he's open to a sabbatical in Japan as he and other leading All Blacks eye lucrative offshore moves following next year's Rugby World Cup. Barrett and Locks Sam Whitelock and Brodie Retallick are reportedly considering club contracts or simply requesting a break after the tournament. New Zealand Rugby has previously granted sabbatical clauses in the contracts of premier players, with Japan increasingly seen by the national body as a preferred destination, primarily because it isn't as physically demanding as club rugby in Europe. The All Blacks play the Wallabies in Yokohama this weekend. Australia's reputation as a sporting nation is in danger because of a broken funding model, says a group of Olympic champions. Swimming legend Ian Thorpe and 42 other Australian former athletes have written an open letter pleading for a rethink of the current funding model. Australia's medal hauls have slipped at every Olympic Games after the Sydney 2000 Games, and a fresh funding model has been initiated by Sport Australia, with more emphasis to be put on grassroots sports instead of medal tallies. That's the news.
Nationals leader defiant after slipping in the polls.
What you see in the toughest, worst week is the underlying strength of us and the weakness of this government.
A dramatic forecast for superannuation.
The number of over 65s is going to double in 20 years, but the cost is going to triple. So we're going to be spending $98 million a day on New Zealand super in about 20 years.
And mystery remains over the killing of a Saudi journalist.
They refused to allow the Turkish authorities to use something called luminol, which would reveal if there were any blood splatters inside there.
All will be revealed on Morning Report with Guy and Espiner and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, will meat be off our future menus? Oxford University's Dr. Marco Springman on how the planet will feed 10 billion people by 2050. And after 10, Tini Molyneux on her pioneering career at the forefront of Māori broadcasting. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Coromandel Peninsula, including Bay of Plenty, mainly fine isolated showers. Waikato to Wellington, including the central high country, mostly cloudy. A few showers from tomorrow morning, turning to rain south of Taumaranui in the evening. From Gisborne to Wairarapa, mainly fine, cloud increasing tomorrow and rain developing in Wairarapa in the evening. For Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine today, rain spreading north tomorrow morning and afternoon, then clearing overnight. For Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, cloudy, rain and heavy falls in Fiordland, spreading to Westland today and to Bulla tomorrow morning, then clearing from the south. Otago and Southland, cloudy, rain about Stewart Island, spreading to mainland Southland this evening and Otago overnight. Snow possible to 800 metres in Otago tomorrow morning, rain easing to showers around midday tomorrow, then clearing at night. And the Chatham Islands cloudy with the odd shower tomorrow. It's 6:09 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. An anonymous letter questioning an investigation into the death of an Auckland medical student has forced an inquest to reopen 9 years after the man died. Zachary Gravatt died from meningococcal disease after it was undiagnosed for 4 hours at Auckland Hospital in 2009. After an inquest in 2011, the DHB was ordered to pay the family compensation when the coroner found shortcomings in Mr Gravatt's treatment. Then in 2016, the family was sent a letter that it says reopened old wounds. Tom Furley reports.
Zachary Gravatt was a healthy, active 22-year-old student up until he died just 15 hours after waking up with a fever and pain. Today, the inquest has been reopened after his family received an anonymous letter that called into question elements of the Auckland DHB's original investigation. Coroner Morag McDowell has decided to maintain suppression orders covering the contents of the letter, and witness evidence also cannot be reported until later in the inquest. But Zachary Gravatt's parents have recounted the harrowing last moments of their son's life and what it meant to get the anonymous letter. Jennifer Gravatt says she had never seen her son so unwell.
I had a very strong desire to hit the red emergency button to get some urgent action to help Zachary. It was only my sense of not wanting to make a fuss in what was then, at that time, Zachary's place of employment.
After some time, medical staff stepped up their activity and rushed Mr Gravatt to the critical care unit.
I saw Zachary's bed go by me with people all around it. One lady was managing a breather bag for Zachary. I was not given the nod to accompany him, and sadly I did not.
The family waited downstairs in the whānau room, and then a nurse came rushing towards them.
We were told that things were not looking good. Just as we were recoiling from this news, another nurse burst into the room and said, "Run with me now so that you can see Zach before he dies." We all ran along the corridor. I looked through an internal window onto Zachary, who had by then died.
The nurse offered to help the family take a print of Mr Gravatt's hand.
I was shocked to see that the rigor mortis was already set in, and it was hard to move his fingers to get a print, but we managed it. I remember thinking that Zachary must have died some time ago for this to be the case.
Zachary Gravatt's father, Lance Gravatt, described going back to the hospital the following morning to thank the doctors and to try to find out what happened in the critical care unit.
While they were still waiting the blood results to confirm what infection it was, their suspicion was that Zachary had died of meningococcal, and that really that was something that had dawned on them only as Zach had been admitted up to DCCM in a terrible state.
On the 2nd of September 2016, the family was sent a letter with the words "private and confidential" printed on the envelope. In a written statement, Lance describes the allegations in the letter having a devastating effect on him and his family 7 years after his son's death. He said, "Receiving the letter has plunged us back to the very start. We now have no idea what happened to Zachary that night. The possibility that he may have suffered terribly for well over an hour, knowing he was going to die and without his family by his side, breaks me. The letter has reopened all of our old wounds." The family say they trusted the DHB and its investigation, but Lance Gravatt says that now may be marred by lies, deceit and unprofessionalism. The inquest is set down for 5 days. I tamaki makaurau mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Tom Furley tēnei.
A drier than usual spring has prompted warnings to conserve water in some parts of the country, while farmers fear they're heading for a second dry year in a row. Most of New Zealand has had less rainfall than usual over the past 3 months, causing soil moisture levels to dry up. Matt Chatterton finds out why it's happening and what effect it's having.
If you've noticed it's been a drier spring than usual, you're not alone. In Wairarapa, Masterton residents are not allowed to use handheld hoses because the water supply from the Wainawa River is running very low. Masterton District Council's David Hopman says the region has only had 31 millimetres of rainfall in the last month, which is well below the average.
The health of our rivers is very, very important, so when they are low, we do need to minimise our water use. But if we don't get that rain and going through, we've got a lot of summer ahead of us, we potentially will be imposing further and even potentially total hose ban restrictions into the summer.
Further south, Gore has established a task force to prepare for a water shortage instead of reacting to circumstances like it did last summer. NIWA Principal Forecaster Chris Brandolino says it's been abnormally dry for the past 3 months, with some areas getting just 50% of rainfall compared to last year. And it's having a big impact underfoot.
Pretty much the entire North Island is at some degree of dryness for the time of year in terms of the soil moisture. Same can be said for the upper South Island. So basically just north of Christchurch all the way to the top of the South Island, soil moistures are running low for the time of year.
Mr Brandolino says the lack of rainfall is even having effect on our hydro lakes, which are just 35% full. In some parts of Canterbury, farmers are already having to turn their irrigators on. Mid-Canterbury Federated Farmers President Michael Salverson says that's because frosts and drier than usual conditions have stopped water flowing down from the hills into the region's rivers.
It's not dried up quite as quick as it might have done, but mindful of what happened last year, where through November into December we had, I think it was 42 days without any rainfall in Christchurch on the lower plains, and so therefore if that happens again we'll be in pretty deep trouble again pretty quick.
Mr Salverson says it's too early to throw the drought word around yet, but farmers are keeping an eye on the skies. While the majority of the New Zealand agriculture industry is crying out for rain, others are hoping the skies stay clear. New Zealand Kiwi Fruit Growers Chief Executive Nikki Johnson says Bay of Plenty growers need the sunshine as the season kicks into gear.
It's actually really important for the bees to be able to do their job that we give them some good weather and some sunshine. So for us the critical period for water is a bit later in the year when we're talking about fruit set and fruit sizing.
Most of the country should get a light dousing of rain later this week, but NIWA's Chris Brandolino warns the rest of the year is unlikely to be wet.
Above normal rainfall for the 3-month period as a whole looks pretty unlikely. It's not a zero chance, but if you're placing odds, the highest odds are for rainfall to be normal or below normal for pretty much the entire country, less the eastern part of the North Island.
So it might not just be Masterton facing water restrictions this summer. For Checkpoint, Matt Chatterton.
Meanwhile, an embattled Christchurch City Council says it's now up to residents to help them get chlorine out of the city water supply. The council has faced criticism for the decisions to chlorinate, the events leading up to it and the chlorination itself. Earlier this year, a decision was made to chlorinate the city's pristine water supply for 12 months after it was found that some of the city's 140 wells were at risk of contamination. The council invited media to one of the pumps that needs upgrading to get an update on how work is progressing. Logan Church went along.
We're at Grampian Pump Station in northern Christchurch, where work is underway to upgrade 3 wells. This is part of a massive amount of work the council is doing after it was revealed in January some of the city's wells were not secure. As a result, the decision to temporarily chlorinate for 12 months was rushed through by the council, and staff raced to develop and execute a plan.
We have 140 wells in the city and 30 of those are signed off and secure, so we've still got quite a lot still to do. Now over here behind you we've got 3 wells on this site that we're upgrading. One we're putting new headworks on, and this one just here where we're putting down a new grout seal and bringing the well up above ground.
That's Helen Beaumont, the council's water supply improvements program manager. She's hopeful enough work can be done by the 12-month chlorination deadline to get the chemical out.
So that target of May in 2019 is still a challenging target, but if all goes well, we'll meet that and have the chlorine out. One of the problems for us is that May will be winter demand and the challenge will be next summer.
Last summer saw huge water usage across the city, including 500 million litres over just one weekend alone. And Ms Beaumont says that has to change.
Traditionally in summer, the demand for water doubles across the city, and we can't keep up if we shut down some of our wells and shut down some of our pump stations to continue the works. So we're asking people to conserve water and allow this program to continue through the summer months. So if we can get people to reduce their garden irrigation, let their lawns go brown, use lots of mulch on their vegetable gardens and save a good 20 or 30% over what they usually use in the summer, we'll be able to keep the works going.
The entire upgrade program is expected to cost in the region of $35 million. But while work continues, most of Christchurch's residents will continue to have to drink chlorinated water, including neighbour Tony Stewart.
The water's been awful. You really taste the chlorine in it, and some days it's really bad, other days it's okay, but it's quite variable, so I don't know what they're doing, but it's not good.
You said before it's almost undrinkable.
On some days it is, yeah, it's disgusting. You know, you make a cup of tea or coffee and it's just so strong, it's bloody terrible.
Unless the councillors and the mayor vote for it to continue next year, the chlorine has to be out of Christchurch's water by the end of May 2019. The race is on. Kei o te tahi ahau mō te hōtaka o te ahi ahi nei, ko Logan Church Chennai.
Last year, Max Toll drove from Cape Reinga to Bluff to gauge the national mood ahead of the election as part of his political series Beyond the Beehive. Now for our 1 Year On series, he's asking everyday New Zealanders whether they think the coalition government has had any real impact on people's lives in the 12 months since it came to power. In today's episode, Max explores the government's commitment to developing the regions.
When we drove through Northland last year, we saw a few Labour Party billboards that simply promised strong regions. And regional development has certainly been a big focus for this government. We also met a few people who felt like they had been left behind. A lot of jobs dried up here a long time ago as some of those manufacturers that form the backbone of some of these small towns. They either packed up and moved overseas or were simply victims of changing times. Horticulture, however, is an industry where there has been some growth. We're just outside of Whangarei to meet Patrick Malley, who runs a local company that grows fruit in an environmentally friendly and sustainable way. Hi, Patrick, how are you going?
Good to see you.
So this is it, huh?
Yeah, welcome to Maungatauperi Berries. We grow kiwi fruit, but also significantly we grow hydroponic berries, so raspberries, blackberries and blueberries. There's a sea of green through here, but in about a month and a half's time, there'll be thousands of red raspberry fruit sitting on each of these bones. We've come at the wrong time.
Is there much of a horticulture industry in Northland?
I mean, compared to other regions like your Bay of Plenties or your Hawke's Bays and the like, no. But that's certainly changing at the moment. It's going to be fantastic to have horticulture as a good part of the backbone here in Northland. There's some fantastic soil and regions and climate up here that's going to be really beneficial for horticulture. And I think horticulture can also really be beneficial for people and jobs and those sorts of opportunities.
Harvest manager Aroha has worked with Patrick for more than 5 years.
Yeah, I was just coming out of high school, was working a few jobs and then moved down to Whangarei from a small town and come here, so...
Whereabouts? What small town?
Small town Kaio, all the way up north, so yeah.
So growing up in Kaio, what were the type of industries that people usually got into?
There's nothing up there, mainly just agriculture or the oyster farms, but they got hit pretty bad with the disease, so there's not much work in Kaio at the moment.
But the government is trying to change that. Northland is one of the big winners from the government's $1 billion a year Provincial Growth Fund. Millions are being poured into projects in the region to create jobs, fix up infrastructure, diversify the economy and boost tourism in the region.
We're seeing a lot of support coming through from government and both at the local and the national level, and not just to horticulture but to Northland in general. And I think it's going to take a while for that actually to bear fruit, if you excuse the pun. We're excited to see it happen, we really are, and we're excited to go along the journey, and I can't wait to see what the end of that actually looks like.
Last year, when we visited beautiful Wairoa in Hawke's Bay, although it's a little bit more grey today, we just happened to meet Zach Stark, an American with dreams of setting up a film and music production facility in the town. In the past, Wairoa, I suppose at least to outsiders, has been known for its gang problems and has really been dominated by those primary industries. Zach, however, is working to change those perceptions.
Hey, bro.
Zach,
welcome, man.
Nice to see you.
Come on in, dude.
Thank you.
But yeah, so welcome back, I guess, eh? Come on, fellas.
Right now, the old Clyde Hotel is still being renovated by Zach and his family, but he dreams of people coming here to play music and learn production skills. So, is there a lot of talent in Wairoa?
That's one of the biggest drivers for us coming here, was just the amount of creativity that isn't always given the opportunity.
So, in the past year, there has been a change of government.
While I know a lot of people here that, at least that I was dealing with, were big supporters of the Labour government, hoping that they would support smaller places like this, the workforce in places like this. With forestry and the meatworks and stuff, that's been a big section of this place staying alive in the way that it is and with the people here. But we're hoping to move that and reframe it a little bit to the creative goals of locals and the creative things of youths.
Where there's more doors than mentors that measure your worth and ignore the serfs. That's why we went in and just made our own turf. Now watch them observe, we building a herd that gets on their nerves. We did it, no perks, got out of their hearse like whoop, whoop, whoop. Swerve. Yeah, life's a bitch, but
I guess we'll never get away from primary industry, I don't think, but let's try and encourage other industries to at least grow from here. We just had some people through here that run a studio in Hong Kong, and we have worked with them in the past, and there's no sense that if they ever get a brief that says, hey, we want, you know, a Kiwi accent, or we want such and such thing, if we can fill it here, then we absolutely will, and we'll compete with them on the global marketplace, because you can now.
Wairoa hasn't been left out of the Provincial Growth Fund announcements. There's $5 million for reopening the rail line to Napier and money to plant manuka trees in a wetland near the town. In this year's budget, the government also promised $15 million to boost education and employment opportunities for rangatahi. But Zach has his doubts about how the young people of Wairoa will benefit.
If you're telling the person, nah, you got to go and be a lawyer, a banker, or whatever, and if you're too stupid for that, then good luck at the gang, mate. See you later. You know, then you've missed out. What about their individual thing? What if they loved carving? What if they loved, music and all these things that help make our lives better?
Nah, not the type that gives a about the heat, nah. You can go and get the
Pratima Hauraki is a Wairoa local who makes music with Zach as the rap group Rugged and Wild.
King and the chief, hoorah.
I'ma go ahead and break the ice, cuz you don't know me, nah. You don't know my background, you don't know nothing, you don't know my history. So let me break it down so you can understand. Simple information, don't wanna give you my whole plan.
He also believes regional development needs a youth focus, and it can't just be about education or bolstering traditional industries.
Our rangatahi nowadays, they need something to give them something to believe in, that they can actually achieve something, whether you failed at school or not, because I'm one of those kids that didn't go so far with school, but backwards and forwards in politics, and a lot of these kids will go through that. If you go to AVCO and you ask all of those workers besides the old chaps, do you really love this job? Ask the young ones, can you see yourself loving this job in 5, 6 years? Oh, I don't think any of them will turn around and go, yeah, bro, I love slaughtering meat. It's a hard job, but you won't last long doing something you don't love.
And The Irish government has announced that the site of a former mother and baby home will be excavated. It's believed nearly 800 babies and children may be buried in the grounds of the Catholic-run institution. Here's the BBC's Emma Vardy.
This was once the grounds of a home for unmarried mothers, known as the Fallen Women. A mass grave was found here 4 decades ago. Then people were told it held the remains of those who died during the Great Famine. But more recent research found the grave contained the bodies of almost 800 babies and children. It's believed they were buried in a septic tank. Now the site will be excavated to recover the remains. At a press conference today, the Minister for Children said it was a huge task which presents technical and legal issues.
The actions which will now be taken are a phased approach to the forensic excavation and recovery of the children's remains, insofar as this is possible, and then arrangements for the respectful reburial and memorialization, as well as an appropriate conservation of the site.
It was an important step, she said, for those who believe they have a loved one whose remains are here. This Catholic-run institution had high infant mortality. From the 1920s to 1961, many children died of sickness and malnutrition. The bodies to be exhumed are all believed to be of those aged between 2 days and 9 years old.
But it is great, really, for all the mothers that had babies here, whether they were adopted or fostered or buried here. At least it's an acknowledgement that the state and church did wrong to them.
It was an amateur historian who first brought this scandal to light. Catherine Corliss's findings exposed the vast number of child deaths, and she's long called for the mass grave to be dug up.
I'm just very, very relieved. I'm very happy for the survivors. I am happy for all the little babies who are buried right on this spot, right underneath us here in the tanks. And it's more than we expected, really.
And that is it for Checkpoint this evening. We will catch you again tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The police have been in touch with the Electoral Commission following a complaint about the National Party's handling of donations. The lawyer for the Auckland rugby coach, today found guilty of almost 100 sex charges, is not ruling out an appeal. The Commerce Commission says the record $1.9 million fine imposed on Steel and Tube for making false claims reflects the seriousness of the offending. And Nelson MP Nick Smith says expert analysis is challenging accounts of the 2013 death of Christchurch woman Libby Mackay, and he's welcoming a new look at the case by police. Our next news and weather is at 7.
This week on Are We There Yet?
All milestones with my child were delayed.
Raising a